Good morning, everyone. I'm Councillor Amrik Jhawar, the Mayor of the Borough of Telford and Deakin, and on behalf of the Telford and Deakin Council, I would like to welcome you all to this year's Holocaust Memorial Civic Ceremony. Holocaust Memorial Day is the International Day on the 27th January to remember the millions of people murdered during the Holocaust, alongside those killed under Nazi persecution and in the subsequent genocides in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia, and Darfur. This event plays an important part in bringing our communities together to pause and reflect. Let us use this time to learn lessons from the past and to recognize that genocide does not just take place on its own. It's a steady process which can bring if discrimination, racism, and hatred are not prevented, and we should be prepared to guard against it happening again in the future. Throughout today's ceremony, you will hear more about this year's theme, and we are pleased to welcome some guest speakers who will be talking to you more about their thoughts and experiences. So thank you for joining us today, and I will now hand over to David Sidaway, Chief Executive of Telford and Deakin Council, who is going to tell you more about this year's theme. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. We're fortunate here in the UK, we are not at immediate risk of genocide. However, discrimination has not ended, nor has the use of the language of hatred or exclusion. There is still much to do to create a safer future, and Holocaust Memorial Day is an opportunity to start this process. Each year, thousands of activities take place for Holocaust Memorial Day, bringing people from all backgrounds together to learn lessons from the past in creative, reflective, and inspiring ways. From schools to libraries, workplaces to local authorities, today's activities offer a real opportunity to honour the experiences of people affected by the Holocaust and genocide, and to challenge ourselves to work for a safer, better future. This year, the theme is One Day, and there are many ways this can be interpreted. Survivors of the Holocaust and of genocide often talk about the one day when everything changed. For many, it is hard to pick out just one day, as to keep going through each and every day can be a huge struggle with no end in sight and no glimmer of hope that the next day will be any better. For today's ceremony, we are putting aside time to remember and learn from the past. Those who were targeted and persecuted held out for the one day in the future when all their suffering would be over, hoping they would all see the day of liberation. On Holocaust Memorial Day, we learn from genocide for a purpose. By learning from this, we can empathise with others today, and when we look ahead to one day with no genocide, we need to ask ourselves, what can I do to help break the cycle of persecution so this never happens again? We're now going to hear from our first guest speaker.
Thank you all so much for joining me at this Holocaust Memorial Day event. My name's Eve Clevenger, and I'm a retired local GP. Each year, as January approaches, I think, what am I going to say new about the Holocaust? We know around 6 million Jewish people were murdered. The facts, the stories, personal testimonies, they've been written and talked about for quite some time. So what can I say today that will help us grasp the enormity of the horror that befell the Jews in the Second World War? And we must not forget it wasn't just Jews, but other groups who were deemed not fit for life. The disabled, black people, gay people, gypsies, political opponents. The word grasp is one my mother used when she talked about how her brother, whom she worshipped, had his life ended by the Nazis, along with his wife and 7-year-old daughter Rita. I just can't grasp it, she would say, that someone so good had to go that way. I heard this often as a child. I didn't understand then. Now, I also have great difficulty in grasping what happened, and that such events continue to happen to this day, and we have the horrific events of subsequent genocides in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia and Darfur. I see my task is to help us remember what happened, remember those that perished, and to never forget. Because as fewer and fewer of the survivors of the concentration camps are left to tell the world what happened, it falls to me as a second-generation survivor to talk about the stories I heard growing up from the survivors in my family, now no longer still alive. I become a witness to those events, and you listening here today, you also all become witnesses too to what happened. The theme of this year's Holocaust Memorial Day is one day. And I don't know which day to pick when everything changed in my family. Tell me what I should pick. Should I pick the day my mother walked into a police station in Czechoslovakia, now the Czech Republic, in the spring of 1939, talked with the Gestapo officer there, and he said, "Okay, I'll let you go." And he granted her wish, this 27-year-old petite Jewish woman, to come and get a visa to go to England. What a miraculous stroke of luck that day, the day that saved her life. Or should I pick the 26th day of October 1942, the date that has been carefully documented by the Nazis, when the wife of my mother's brother and their 7-year-old daughter Rita were murdered. Documents show my mother's brother Ludwig arrived at the camp of Theresienstadt on the 24th of October 1942. Going through some documents this year, I had found out that he had a broken leg when the papers for the deportation of his wife and daughter arrived at their home in Pilsen. What a day that must have been for the family. Although there were no papers for his removal, he decided to go with his wife and daughter Rita, and therefore that might be why the trail of his murder has not been documented. The International Red Cross Tracing Service can only find records of his arrival at Theresienstadt on the 24th of October 1942, but the date and destination of his onward travel and transfer to his death remains unknown. Or should I pick the 28th day of October 1944, when my mother's sister Olga, her son Egon, and her husband, my uncle Kenny, arrived at the platform at Auschwitz. There, my aunt Olga and cousin Egon, who just turned 11 2 weeks before, the aunt and cousin I would never meet, they were selected to go straight to the gas chambers. The smoke from the chimneys that night was what my uncle was told was where his wife and son were. Uncle Kenny had been selected for life that day, but it was a heartbreaking life without his precious son, Egon. Or should I pick the day in the spring of 1944, when my grandmother, my father's mother, was put on a train in her hometown of Perbrata in Czechoslovakia, now Slovakia, and was never heard of again. It was witnessed by the people of the town, and I've met one such witness who remembers seeing my elderly, frail little grandmother being loaded onto the train. He was a young boy in 1944 and now is an elderly Catholic priest. Most probably she was transported to Auschwitz, since records show that 10,000 people a day, 10,000 people a day were arriving at Auschwitz in 1944, and most were gassed on arrival. But what I want you to hear today is a short account of a survivor of Auschwitz, Kitty Hart-Moxon, who is still alive today, aged 95. The theme of this year's Holocaust Memorial Day has already been said is one day. Well, what you're about to hear is one person's experience not just on one day, but on 3 days. A piece of her story, which was broadcast 40 years ago, was repeated again this month, and by chance I happened to have the radio on. Broadcast on Radio 4 on the 11th of January, 1:45. This is the story I heard.
I was very good at self-hypnosis. I was very good at pretending that A, it didn't hurt, or B, I didn't feel it, or C, it didn't matter. You know, this is the sort of attitude I had. Now, that didn't only apply to the beating, but it also applied to when I was hungry. You know, I lived in a world of fantasy. I used to tell myself I couldn't possibly be hungry because I had a piece of bread and then that should have been enough. I went through what was called a delousing session in the camp, which lasted for 3 days. For 3 days, I was naked in February 44. And when we got back into the block, our clothes had been taken off us and all the stuff off the bunks had been taken away, and we were left naked during the night and standing outside our blocks at the roll call for about 6 hours, completely, totally naked. And yet I kept telling myself I wasn't cold. And this is what helped me through this period. And I saw people crying and shivering and doing nothing about it. I used to jump around, just keep moving. And out of all the thousands on this one block that were naked, only a handful of us remained after 3 days. The rest were all dead. So it helped tremendously to brainwash yourself, and this kind of self-hypnosis was of tremendous help.
The interviewer, Greg Janner, said how hard it was to listen to that. And it really is. And how hard it is to grasp just what people are capable of doing to other people. So I ask each one of you, as witnesses of these horrific stories that you've heard today, to reflect on what you've heard and resolve, take action when you see overt prejudice and racism. As we learn each year of what unspeakable things happened in the past, things that you couldn't imagine happening, because the cruelty that we hear about is so impossibly difficult to grasp, I ask you to not become bystanders when you see injustice. Because in Germany in the 1930s, that is where the seeds of the Holocaust were sown. People of difference were singled out, dehumanized. And when that happened, all manner of extreme, immoral, inhuman acts was able to be carried out. And most of the rest of the communities just stood by and did nothing. Sadly, prejudice pervades our world to this day. We have a wonderful initiative locally to try and confront this in the form of the Telford and Wrekin Interfaith Council, so ably led by the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Raj Mehta. I am so grateful to Raj for all the energy he's put into this, helping to promote a cohesive community. Today, we're trying to learn from the past so that the tragedies of the past will not be forgotten, the dreadful deeds that were committed, reminding us of what human beings are capable of doing to each other, and that the lives that were cruelly ended, my uncle, my 2 aunts, my 2 cousins, my grandmother, those lives were not totally in vain, but may spur us on to work harder to create a better world. Thank you for listening.
I'm Alex, I'm 13, I'm from Marklewood. This is my poem. One day, Abraham created Judaism. One day, the Jews were happy. One day, the Wall Street crash happens. And one day, Hitler is voted into power. One day, he wants all Jews dead. One day, 15,000 Jews lost their life. One day it takes to change the world. This poem represents how precious life is and how lucky we are. Just one day in the future, can we all respect one another?
I'm Daisy and I go to Hart-Moxon Academy, and this is my poem, One Day. How much one day can change it all. One day I was free, the next day I was trapped. One day I was happy, the next day I was sad. One day I could play freely, the next day I was forced to work. One day I was with my family, the next day I was alone. One day I was alive, the next day I was gone, and I didn't know why.
I'm Grace and I go to Hart-Moxon Academy. It all happened on one day. One day Jews lived in peace. One day no one cared as much, but one day something had changed. One day Jews were represented by a single star. One day they were lined up and sent to their nightmares. One day businesses were broken into, sabotaging people's lives. One day someone's life had changed or their families had gone. One day Jews were lied to, getting on trains to their fate. 4 years left 6 million dead. One day we learnt about this in our ethics lesson, and I felt the urge to make a difference.
Hello, my name is Zion and I have written a poem on one day based on the Holocaust. At first they were at peace, but then they weren't, for the SS and SA were no longer at ease. Their civil lives were nice, but Hitler's heart was as cold as ice. He served for no one but himself, for the population of Jews were poor of health. All of a sudden he struck with prejudice. The Jews' duties were killed with negligence. They were put in camps of concentration, and Hitler killed that generation. 77 years of development, yet we can't make everyone relevant. We can mend our problems from the past, or make our improvements not so vast. Be wise in the decision that you make, and reduce the lives that are at stake.
One day. One day in the future, I hope that everyone is treated with equality, no matter what. Nationality, ethnicity, gender or sexuality. That everyone has a life full of happiness with family and friends. One day in the future, I hope that everyone is living life to the fullest, not worrying about what others think, just enjoying the short time we have in this world. Because one day can truly change it all. Because one day you can be alive, and the next day you can be gone.
On the radio, they were telling them, kill every Tutsi. We don't need any Tutsi being left. So take your machetes, take everything you've got, go and kill every Tutsi. That's when we start seeing all the Hutus walking on the street with the machetes.
Good morning everyone. I'm Councillor Paul Watling, Cabinet Member for Stronger and Safer Communities, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everyone that has contributed to today's ceremony. It's so very important that we reflect on what's been said today, learning the lessons from the past and applying them to today. People and communities are what make us feel welcome, and here in Telford and Wrekin we're taking positive action to make the borough a welcoming place to live and work. We take equality very seriously, and I'm really pleased to tell you that the Council's developing a new equality and diversity strategy. This is building on the progress that we've already made in recent years, but we know there is still more to do. The strategy doesn't just take account of our legal duties and responsibilities, it focuses on the type of culture we want to promote across the borough and in the way we treat our residents and customers. There's a real focus around the equality and diversity in our schools as well. Our Multicultural Development Service, in collaboration with local community organisations, delivers training to staff and run a number of different cultural workshops for pupils throughout the year. We've also worked with schools, community partners and the police to develop a trusted panel so we can review, coordinate and provide rapid response to reports of serious incidents that take place in the borough. And we've officially been part of the White Ribbon campaign for nearly a decade, demonstrating our ongoing commitment to preventing domestic abuse. We continue to prevent domestic abuse from happening in the first place by challenging the attitudes and behaviours which foster it. In parallel to all this, we have been positively raising awareness of and celebrating our diverse communities, bringing the whole of Telford and Wrekin together. It's wonderful to see so many of our residents getting involved. We're really proud of the range of effective working relationships we have with partners who are all working to make our communities safer, stronger and more compassionate. One such relationship is with Telford and Wrekin Interfaith Council, and I'd like to introduce Councillor Raj Mehta at this point so he can explain more about what they do.
Hello everyone, my name's Councillor Raj Mehta. I'm the Deputy Mayor of Telford and Wrekin, as well as being the Chair of Telford and Wrekin Interfaith Council. Telford and Wrekin Interfaith Council helps to keep the unity in the community through building and maintaining conversations and cooperation between all faiths and culture groups. We're here to help and work with our partners to bring communities together and to tackle any local issues. There's lots of things we're doing. For example, we are the official out-of-hours food bank for any emergency food parcels that might be needed for anyone in the borough. From cultural needs to dietary requirements are all catered for with the support of Telford and Wrekin Council. We also provide and run equality and diversity workshops for everyone that needs them, including local businesses and local groups. We try to be the voice for people from different backgrounds and cultures and help translate important messages to particular groups. We also work with the police and other community leaders to help maintain peace and unity, as I've said, within the community. We are always on board to support our award-winning Telford and Wrekin Council. Thank you.